That's probably the first word that comes to your head when you hear the name Hugh Hefner. Another one might be Playboy, Playbunny, Bunnies, Mr. Playboy, nudity, sex, etc. Today that is all going to change. We will overview the life of Hugh Hefner by going over his childhood, the beginnings of his business, what he is today, his relationships, and his charity work. We picked Hugh Hefner because we wanted to change people's perspective of him and what the media says.
Hugh Hefner, born in Chicago, Illinois on North New England Street. Raised in the strict and conservative family of Lynn and Grace Hefner, he grew up with a strong Midwestern Methodist influence in his life. During his childhood, he found his escape at the Sayre Clubhouse, where he checked out and read his first book, and then later at the Montclair Theater, where his dreams for his later reality were fueled. His first 2 years of high school, he remained quiet and unenthusiastic in his work. He had an IQ of 152 and was very smart. Then come his junior year at Stuyvesant High, he decided to reinvent himself as Hef, and then became one of the most popular kids in his grade. He invented the Stuyvesant Star, the school newspaper, which was a foretaste of his later journalistic talents. Ending high school, he went into World War II and became a military journalist for the military newspaper of the U.S. He was then honorably discharged and went to the University of Illinois, graduating 2.5 years later with a BA in physiology and a double minor in creative writing and artistic talents. His path then led him back to his hometown.
Starting at an entry-level job in the Chicago office of the risque Esquire magazine, Hugh worked. But in 1953, whenever Hugh was denied the $5 raise he requested, he found himself out on his own. Out with nothing to do, he was determined to start something new. So he came up with the idea to start a magazine that was better than Esquire, in much different, but the same. He came up with some ideas, but he didn't have the funding to start the magazine the way he wanted. After receiving $8,000 from 45 different investors, one being his mom, he began planning for the new magazine. He came up with the name Stag Party at first, but was later then sued by a magazine that had a similar name. And he ended up with a request by a friend, the name Playboy, named after a popular car company at the time. After much planning from his home office, he released the first copy of Playboy magazine December 17, 1953, featuring the color nude you see right there of Marilyn Monroe. After a while, 50,000 copies were sold, and it has been nothing but uphill since.
So some might say that the Playboy Mansion is actually owned by Hugh Hefner, when it's actually not. It's actually owned by his partner company, Icon Acquisition Holdings. On the outside, it seems like very well kept and very fancy, when it's actually being held together by duct tape, and there are tampons laying all over the floors, and it's not fancy at all. There, in the dining room specifically, there are 3 parts to it. There's 3 different tables, and at each table is a seating arrangement that Hugh sets himself. At the first table is where Hugh sits, and those are his favorite bunnies for that day. And the last table is basically for the table of nobodies, where he is annoyed with the bunnies or something. There are over 70 staff members working at the Playboy Mansion. They have a zoo, a garden, an arcade, a swimming pool. They have an Elvis Presley room where Elvis himself slept, and it's actually named after him. The many celebrities rent this room out, and they can sleep with up to 8 bunnies. There is a cigarette burn in one of the paintings on the wall that is still hung up today. The cigarette burn was made by John Lennon himself, and John Lennon actually got in a lot of trouble for it, and he got kicked out of the mansion, and Hugh Hefner almost fought him over it. They have film nights on Friday, Saturday, and Sunday. On Fridays, Hugh Hefner likes to watch movies from the 1950s, and the bunnies actually hide from him because they don't like watching those movies. And on Sundays is the Playboy Bunny's favorite days because they get to watch movies that have not been released to the public yet. The mansion has actually starred in many TV shows. It had its own TV show. It was in Sex and the City, The Amazing Race, The Apprentice, and The Fresh Prince of Bel-Air. It actually holds many parties, and they're all very unique. You can rent the mansion yourself to have your own party, and you get the mansion all weekend long. Many celebrities are invited to these, and they're VIP exclusive. You actually get your own VIP host who shows you around the mansion. There is a mini mansion that is right next door, and it looks exactly the same, only it's a little smaller, and Hugh actually bought it in 1996 for his ex-wife, Kimberly Conrad, who was a Playboy bunny. And across the street is a mini mansion for the Playboy bunnies to stay in themselves.
Hugh Hefner has been married 3 times. First comes Mildred Williams, his college sweetheart. Before their wedding, Mildred confessed to Hefner that she had an affair while he was away in the army. According to an E! True Hollywood Story documentary, Mildred allowed Hefner to sleep with other women in hopes that it would preserve their marriage, but of course it didn't work. They did have a daughter, though. On the bottom there you can see is Christy Hefner, and she was actually the president of Playboy for a really long time. Next comes Kimberly Conrad, and she was the 1989 Playmate of the Year, and she gave Hefner 2 sons, Morrison and Cooper Hefner. Although they separated after 9 years of marriage, they remained technically married for 11 years more because they wanted their youngest son, Cooper, to turn 18 before they got divorced, so she moved into the mansion next door, as Abby said. And lastly, there is Crystal Harris, his current wife. They got married on New Year's Eve in 2012, but originally in 2011, she called the wedding off 5 days before. She wasn't ready for it at all, but then they reconciled and then they did get married. They got married whenever Hugh was 86 and she was 26, so she's actually 40 years younger than his daughter. Yeah. So Hefner has had 6 or 7 girlfriends at a time, and one time he asked a 19-year-old out on a date, and she told him that she had never dated anyone over the age of 24, and he told her, "That's okay, neither have I." So his life isn't just about relationships, however, and here's Debbie to tell you more.
Hugh Hefner has many charitable auctions or foundations and everything. Hugh Hefner started the Hugh Hefner Foundation in 1964, where he pretty much awards people for helping protect or display the First Amendment rights, where you get $5,000 and a plaque, and so far 100 people have been awarded. And even though the foundation was started in 1964, the awards didn't start going out until 1979. Hugh Hefner did an AIDS walk on October 13, 2013 with his girlfriends and his playmates, and they sold lemonade and they walked for a little bit. Hugh Hefner is an old guy, so he understands hearing aids, and Hugh Hefner is a big part of Starkey Hearing Foundation, where they pretty much, a company makes the hearing aids and they send them out worldwide to countries in need, where it's 86 countries, and they sent, in the first year, they sent about 50,000, and since 2000 they've sent 305,000 hearing aids worldwide. Hugh Hefner is probably one of the last people you'll think would be nominated for the Humanitarian of the Year award, but he was on February 12, 2012. He got it for working with a charity called I Donate, where they help tens of thousands of children with chronic illnesses, according to PR Newswire.
Hugh Hefner is a big part of saving the Hollywood sign because the Hollywood sign was at risk of being removed. But Hugh Hefner stepped in and created a foundation to raise $900,000 to save the sign.
Today we have looked at the life of Hugh Hefner. We've gone over his childhood, his business beginning, what he is today, his relationships, and his charity work. We wanted to go over Hugh Hefner because we wanted to change the way people look at him. And we realized today that he's not just Mr. Playboy, but he's also a father, a husband, a businessman, a charity worker, and a person. Thank you.
Awesome.